Hey everybody, DM Jim here, and welcome to another episode of Game Terrain Engineering. This episode, I am not going to be making something. I'm wearing my Dungeons & Dragons t-shirt because I've got something very special, actually two things, that I want to share with you, especially if you are a Dungeons & Dragons fan. For quite a few years now, I've written for a website called geekdad.com, and I write on everything. I review books that I've read, games that I've played, things like that. But one of the things I enjoy most writing about are things involving the history of gaming. Not just D&D, but just war games and role-playing games. Games to me, they were sort of my escape in middle school. I wasn't a jock. I was definitely a nerd. And when I found Dungeons & Dragons and other similar games, it really changed my world. I mean, my career as a writer is directly related to those early days of gaming when I would read books and books and books, and I would write adventures and all sorts of things. This game to me, it will always have a place in my heart. I play it currently, and I'm fascinated with its history. And because of that, over the years, I've written a lot of articles, and I will link as many of these as I can in the description below, so you can go back and check them. They're not all on D&D, but a lot of them are. Probably a significant number of them are. And I write about books and websites that focus on diving into the history of D&D. One of my favorites, and you may be familiar with this one, is this one right here, Playing at the World by John Peterson. Notice his name, Jon. John, I call him a friend. We've met a couple times. He signed my copy at Gen Con a few years back. And John wrote this book. It's thick. How many pages is this? It's over 600, yeah. 640, it's getting up in the 650 page range. I call this the PhD thesis of wargaming history. It focuses on D&D, but a good portion of it focuses on the history prior to D&D being created and how it came together. It's absolutely one of the best books in the world, in my opinion, on the history of wargaming. I read it about once every other year because it takes a while. And I read it because I can just never get enough of this. And I always pick up something new. Every time I read it, there's something maybe I glossed over in the first reading or the second reading or the third reading. And right now I think I'm up to the fourth reading of this. So highly recommended. I'll put a link below. Another colleague of mine who writes for Geek Dad, and he's become a friend, is Michael Whitwer. He wrote a book a few years back called Empire of Imagination. And this is sort of it's a history about Gary Gygax and the birth of D&D, but it's written in a very unusual way. It's written as a novel, or not a first person. I don't believe it's first person. No, it's definitely not first person, but there's dialogue in it, and there's descriptions of scenes and meetings and places. And for me, reading the book, a lot of this, I knew this history, but this was an interesting take because he sort of puts himself in the shoes of Gary and some people around him. And even though it's not fictional, but it's written like a novel, so you get these thoughts of what people were thinking, what Gary was thinking. And there have been some debate about, how accurate is it? I think if you read books like this and others, when you read this, you learn to read between the lines. And Michael did an excellent job. I loved this book, and some people didn't, but I thought it was great because it put me in the story of D&D's development. D&D has people who know me, they will tell you, I am very nostalgic. I have what I call a nostalgia shelf in my office, and I keep on it modules and Dragon magazines and books and games that I've collected over the years. And one of the things that just I stare at and it just fond memories pop in my head. I was in 6th grade, and a lot of people know this story because I've written about it on Geek Dad a number of times. My parents had asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I had seen this game being played called Dungeon. Okay, it was a board game with a dungeon laid out and you moved your figure and you rolled dice. My parents, not really understanding what I was explaining, went to the store and they bought Dungeons and Dragons, not Dungeon. But it was probably the best mistake my parents could have ever made in their life, was not getting me Dungeon, although I did get it years later, but was getting me this. This was my original box, the basic set. It came with these dice. I still have them. They're horrible. They're horrible. They're made, I don't remember what they're made of, but they don't roll well, and they're inked horribly, and they're so light, sometimes when you roll it, you actually just sort of throw it. Horrible dice. Didn't matter. I also got another copy of this. A friend got it, and then he gave it to me because he didn't want it, and it came with chits. We're talking about cardboard that you cut out, like instead of a 6-sided die, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 little chit pieces, and you'd put them in a bag or a cup, mix them up, pull it out, and there was your number. It was horrible. But we didn't care because this was so fun, so cool, so different. This is the book. This book right here, the blue book, this would get you from levels 1 to 3. It didn't have a lot in it. It was only 48 pages? 48 pages. 48 pages long. And this is not the first version of D&D. There's, if you want to do some history reading, look up D&D white box, D&D wood grain box, and you'll see some older history. And then chainmail. Look up chainmail if you haven't, if you don't know the story of chainmail. But anyway, this was my start with D&D right here. And there wasn't a lot to go on for a DM. My players wanted to play, I wanted to play, but no one was willing to DM. And so I stepped up and I became a DM. Occasionally I would play when somebody would volunteer to DM. But, it had spells and monsters, and it talked to you about how to roll a thief, a fighter, a magic user, or a cleric. And there wasn't a lot in it. And the artwork was very, I won't say amateur, because looking back at it, it's incredible artwork from a historical point of view. But compared to the artwork you see in today's D&D books, it definitely looks amateurish, but it wasn't at the time. It made the book, it put in our heads these images of these creatures that we would do, and dwarves and things like that. This book led me, hang on just one second, led me to this book. Actually, I believe, I can't remember, I think the Player's Handbook came out first. I should know this. I've written about it. I just can't recall at this moment. Monster Manual. Either the Player's Handbook or Monster Manual came out first. I'll figure out which, and I'll post it in the information below. But these 3 books, right here, this became my afternoon. It also became my school, because frequently during 7th grade English, Miss Ducker's class, which sucked. Miss Ducker, if you're watching this, I can say it years later, your English class was the worst thing in the world. But I got plenty of reading time done, because I would tuck these or Dragon magazines into my notebook or whatever and read them when I should have been reading other stuff. Anyway, sorry, Miss Ducker. So I've got all these bits and pieces of history, my history with Dungeons and Dragons. And I realized that there are a lot of people out there who found D&D, years later, decades later, or even just recently. And you may want to start learning some of the history of this great game that we all love. Well, the folks over at 10 Speed Press have just released a new book. There's actually 2 variations of it. They sent me copies of both to review. So this isn't a paid review in the sense, they did send these to me, but I had already ordered one of these from Amazon as a pre-order months and months back. And I'm still gonna honor that order. I want a second copy because I have 2 boys. I want to give each one of them a copy of this. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about this, Art and Arcana, a visual history of D&D. This book is written by Michael Whitwer, Kyle Newman, John Peterson, and Sam Whitwer. Sam is Michael's brother. Michael and John I know personally. I don't know the other 2 gentlemen, but I want to. Because what they've done here, it's about 450 pages, almost 450 pages in length. It is a history of D&D from those early days of tabletop wargaming before D&D even existed and they were using the miniatures to play war games, all the way up to the most recent version of D&D 5e that we all love and play. This book has more artwork, more sketches, more photos, more advertisements, that D&D or TSR ran at the time, more coverage of the video games that D&D was based on. It's incredible. I just spent the last almost 3 hours skimming through it, and then I started reading, going back and rereading. I'm going to read it again because I know I skipped over some parts. It's got an introduction by Joe. Okay, he writes the introduction or the foreword to the book, and his story, which I'm not going to ruin for you, is a lot of our stories. D&D did not have a cool. It wasn't cool to play D&D back in the early 80s. Let's just say that. The book goes on to talk about, how the game began, and it's broken into, each chapter is started with the name of a spell, okay, and then a description of the spell on the other page. They're numbered. Don't get me wrong, but it's an interesting way to start the chapters with these spells that are historical in nature. And then it starts with what we all know, the white box right there, the books that came in the wood grain box or the white box that began Dungeons & Dragons. But then it takes a step back. There's your chainmail that I just mentioned previously, right there. Okay. It takes a step back and it jumps back, and then it starts moving forward at a fairly even pace, explaining how this game developed. And what's so incredible about this book is all the artwork that they pulled up. They found it with collectors and people who were involved in the game and involved with TSR. And, things like this. The document that Dave Arneson sent Gary Gygax, and then they produced this typewritten book about the beginnings of D&D. Just amazing stuff. So much of this artwork in here, those of us who've been with the game forever will recognize, the Lizard Man. And by the way, throughout the book, anytime you see a really awesome piece of art, there's usually a little shield down here that tells you the artist who did it. These are scattered all through here. There's a lot of things you will recognize. The spread of the back cover and the front cover of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. There's stories about this artwork and how it came to be. I love this page right here. I have all these. I call them the Pastel Modules. The first 9 or 10, I can't remember, I think it's 10 modules that were released for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, they had these pastel colored covers. And I still have them. I love them. A few I didn't have and I obtained later in life, but they're just amazing to me, including the Tomb of Horrors, the original Tomb of Horrors. I'm going to come back to Tomb of Horrors in just a second with a very special item that you may be interested in. Obviously, here's the spread for the Dungeons & Masters guide right here. Let's keep going. The cartoons. Remember all the funny, strange cartoons that were tossed about in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons books? A lot of them are in here with some discussions about how they came to be. If you have a favorite Dungeons & Dragons artist, he's in here. It's in here, or she's in here, because there's a mix of male and female artists, and you may not know that. You may have some favorite piece of art and not know who they are. This book will tell you who they are and what their relationship is to the game. Remember these advertisements in comic books right here for Dungeons & Dragons? I remember these fondly. They would have made me want to play D&D if I hadn't already known about it at the time. And of course, who can recall, the early video games for the Atari or Intellivision? That was it. And that horrible Mattel D&D game right here that was bad. I remember looking at these things and wanting them and not being able to afford them, or I didn't have the game console to particularly play them. Some of the bad history, and I say bad history, D&D has some, had some bad times when the press and parents just weren't all that friendly to the game, and all that's covered in here. But really, it's about this art, the artwork. Who can forget Dragonlance, right? Whole section on Dragonlance. You get into some of the more more legendary modules, you know, like this one. Some of us may remember this one. This one's coming out again very soon, I think in November, the Undermountain. But, you know, I wish I had time to go through almost every page here and show you, show you some of this stuff. One thing I do want to show you, there are a lot of these full color double and 2-page spreads. These things are all throughout the book. So a lot of times you would only see part of this on, say, a Dragon magazine or a snippet of the actual, spread in a book or something. And here you get to see the whole thing. Let's see, what else can I show you? It covers all versions of D&D, including version 4, which, love it or hate it, it's covered in here, and its opinion is covered in here. Just some incredible stuff. Let's see, what else can I have you? Oh, one of the things, I can't find an example right now, a lot of the famous monsters like the Beholder or the Mind Flayer, there are full-page spreads that show you their evolution, from when they were first created all the way through the different versions of D&D. And, I mean, it's just, I could sit here and just thumb through and just show you so many pictures. But anyway, Dungeons & Dragons, Art and Arcana, A Visual History. 450 pages. It's $50. I think it's a little less on Amazon. But if you love this game like I do, you're going to want to have a copy of this. There's a lot of things I saw when I was a kid that I couldn't afford, and I've never been able to find them again or haven't been able to afford them, even as an adult. But they're in here, and all it takes is a visual, seeing it, and it brings back all those memories. And I think a lot of you who have a history with D&D are going to do the exact same thing. You're going to turn page after page, because I was sitting there and just turning pages. It seemed like every page I'd go, oh, I remember this. Oh, I remember this. It's nothing but a book of great memories for me, and I think it will be for you too. Now, $50, 450 pages. But if you're a really, really hardcore D&D fan, you may want to do this one. They have also released this boxed set, okay? It's A Visual History, same book. It's the same book, same number of pages, but this one has a different cover. Let me show it to you. It has just a cover with a dragon's head on it, okay? It's the exact same contents inside, promise. I compared them. But what it also has in the cover of the box, let me take it out here. Well, I should show you. In the cover of the box is this envelope, and it's held in place by these little straps right here. This is a bunch of artwork and ephemera and some other special items that may interest you. This collector's edition costs $125, probably a little cheaper on sites like Amazon. But what it comes with is a lot of these, it comes with large posters, like this one. This is from a recent adventure for 5e, the Giants, what was it, the Storm King's Thunder, see that? You get one of those, it's like 6-panel, and here's a 4-panel. Remember this? This was the artwork for the, I think it was, I don't know if it was the original Dungeon Masters screen, but I think it was. This artwork right here. A lot of these I'm going to frame and hang in my workshop. They're just so Fiend Folio spread, front and back. Remember, this is one of, I'm not going to show them all because I want some to be a surprise, but I do want to show you one of my favorites. I love this one right here. That will always be one of my favorites. It's one of the ones in that video right there. I recreated a miniature wall, storage place, and I used that as my inspiration right there. That's definitely going to get framed. Also, let's see. Nope, don't want to show you that one. Sorry, I know you want to see all these, but I don't want to ruin all the surprises. And then you get these one-shots, these little ones right here. This is from the second edition Player's Handbook, right there. So a lot of you probably recognize that one. This one I definitely remember, Swords of Deceit. Look at that. I mean, that is just one of my favorite paintings. I just think that's incredible. A lot more of these. I'm not going to show them all to you. But here's my favorite thing tucked inside this envelope. Those of you who know about the wood grain box or the white boxes know that those 3 original books, they had a certain look to them, right? The fonts and the colorization. Gary Gygax created Tomb of Horrors, which I love Tomb of Horrors. I've run it a couple times. He originally ran that as a contest or at one of the conventions. I'm trying to remember which one. It was Origins. It says at the first Origins convention, which took place from July 25th to July 27th, 1975 in Baltimore, Maryland. Gary Gygax ran his initial notes on the Tomb of Horrors to players, and that would eventually become a module that we can all buy and run as DMs and play as players. The Tomb of Horrors has a long history, but I've never seen this before. The authors had this created. It is Gary Gygax's original sketches and typed notes for the Tomb of Horrors, and it's been created in a little book just like those original D&D books right here. Okay, look at the back. Look at that. Gygax's, original sketch for the, well, we won't ruin it. Some of you may not know what this is, so I'm not going to say anything. But anyway, take a look. It's a copy of the typewritten notes that Gary created, and I haven't read this yet. I'm going to sit down tonight and read through this. It's got the original map, and then it's got his artwork, which some of it is easily recognizable, like that one. That's recognizable, and recognizable, because this artwork was done again for the printed version of Tomb of Horrors that they did. Yeah, look at that. All these things should bring up memories for you. I don't want to show them all because they're just so great, but it's really well done. It's even got an appendix, the Tomb of, was it Rahotep? Yeah, Tomb of Rahotep by Alan Lucian. I'm curious about that one. I don't know a lot about that one, but obviously it's been included for a reason, so I'm going to learn about it. That is one of the little items that comes in this envelope in the, what they call the special edition or collector's edition. It's called the Dungeons & Dragons Special Edition Boxed Book and Ephemera Set. So these may not be, of anything interest to you. If that's the case, you could just get the basic book. But if you want all this, it comes in, let me attach this back in here so you can see how it's done. The envelope is held in by these straps, okay? And then the box just closes up like that. There you go, there's the front and the back. $125. So there you go. A brand new book covering the history of our favorite game, Dungeons & Dragons, and the artwork and the behind the scenes stuff. It's just, I couldn't not have this on my shelf knowing what's in it. And I think if you are a fan of Dungeons & Dragons and like the history and the artwork, you're going to want to check this out. It's just, it's incredible. And to the 4 authors who did it, just incredible. Well done, great job. I'm hoping to carry it with me to future conventions and get you guys to sign my copy, but it will have a prime place on my bookshelf. And when I'm older, I'm gonna have 2 copies of this because I ordered one from Amazon a while back. I want each of my sons, if they're interested, they'll get a copy of this and at least know what all the craziness was that their dad was involved in from middle school all the way up until I don't know when. So anyway, I apologize for the length of this video and the fact that I'm not making anything here, but when these arrived on the doorstep, I didn't know what it was. It was a heavy box. I picked it up, I opened it, and I thought it was my Amazon order, but the book doesn't come out until October 23rd. So you've still got a couple weeks to pre-order if you want. I don't know if the special boxed version is limited edition, like a limited number or not. So if that interests you, you may want to go ahead and grab it now. I will put links below to both of these books. These are Amazon affiliate links, so if you click on them, it'll give me, a little bit of change, which will go to support me and the channel. And I definitely, anything I make off of it, I will put back into the channel. I need to buy a new camera for up here so that I can start painting minis and streaming it at the same time. So I think I may use that money for that. So anyway, if you have any questions, post them below. If you have any stories especially, ones involving some of these original crew and games. I'd love to hear about them. I love hearing people talk about when they were kids back in the 80s and 90s and playing D&D and some of the craziness that was going on. And, nowadays we hear that it's cool to play D&D, and I think it is. There's still a lot of stigma attached to it, and I think when you tell somebody you play D&D, you still get an odd look from a lot of people. But we don't care. It is fun, and they're missing out. And I do try to introduce this game to as many people as I can. I love telling people when they ask, yeah, I play D&D. I think it's a fun game, and you should try it. It is cool to play D&D, and it has a great history, and I think that people who play it should know the history. So whether you get this book, or this book by Michael Whitwer, or this book by John Peterson, or any of the other, there's other books that talk about the history of wargaming and D&D and stuff, definitely give them a read. They are so fun to read back in the pre-internet days, and no Kinkos back then, everything. They cranked a lot of things by hand, copies and stuff like that, and they used typewriters to type all the rules, and it's crazy. It's crazy, the history of our hobby, but I wouldn't have it any other way. It's such a great history, and it just is fun to think back on where it was, where it is now, and everything in between. So anyway, thank you for giving me this time to just go a little nostalgic and rave about this new book. My next episode, I'll make you something. This is DM Jim. I'll see you in the next episode.